Right, should we get going? Should we make a move?
Yep.
Great. So thanks to everyone who is joining us this afternoon. So today it will be myself. I'm joined by Dr. Ingo Reinhardt, who's the co-founder of Buynomics and history within pricing, and who developed the Buynomics method. We'll touch very, very quickly on a bit about who we are just before we get into the fun stuff this afternoon. And myself, so I'll be on hosting duties today. So if there is anyone who's got any questions about anything we talk about today, please drop it in the chat. We'll do our best to get back to you. Or should you want to speak to us in more detail about what Buynomics offers, please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or drop us an email. So today's session, we are going to be looking at a bit more of a light-hearted approach to pricing and looking at some of the pricing horror stories. As I say, I'm quite looking forward to this session today, and there's some great case studies we've got on where pricing can go wrong sometimes. So Inge, if you don't just mind going on to the next slide, please. So very high-level introduction about Buynomics if you haven't come across us before. So we're about 3 years in the making now, and Ingo, in conjunction with one of our colleagues, Sebastian, founded Buynomics in order to revolutionize how companies across a variety of different industries, such as software, FMCG, telecommunications, but not an exhaustive list, are helping revolutionize how we make decisions on revenue and portfolio management. So how you can make sure you're pulling the right lever in price, promotions, assortment, or product to ultimately make sure you're giving the best proposition to your customers and maximizing your profit and sales. So we're the only company out there that's using virtual customers technology that leverages machine learning and can predict outcomes to an unparalleled level of accuracy of around 95%. So as I say, if anybody wants to talk to us in more detail about Buynomics and how we can help your business, please do get in touch. And without further ado, I pass you over to Ingo.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for the introduction. And so what we have today, because it's the Halloween weekend, we want to highlight some pricing horror stories. Probably some of you have already seen some of them, but what we thought is also in the context of Halloween, we will do this in the form of a magic trick. As you may know, a magic trick consists of 3 parts. So the pledge. We show you something ordinary, these pricing stories that are, I would say, funny if you know them, or if you don't know them. Then the second part of a good magic trick is the turn. We show you something different about these stories. So you may think you know everything about these stories, but we will tell you hopefully something that you haven't known about then. And then the third part of a magic trick is the prestige, where we hope to show you something completely different, and that will change the way you look at these things. So these are the 3 steps: the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. And let's jump right into it. And to open, while these stories are meant to be funny, also they're real. There's always a grain of truth in them. So if we are looking at these extreme cases, I think there's also always something that we can learn also for our day-to-day business. All right, let's get right into it. And here is an example. As I said, maybe some of you will already know it, but it highlights an important thing. There is all of you will probably have seen pricing books, certain products priced on Amazon. And there has been a very interesting case of a book, The Making of a Fly, a book probably you haven't heard of, but it's just a biology book on Amazon. And there were 2 vendors who offered this product, and they were using, at first glance, an innocent pricing algorithm. One was always trying to be the most expensive in the market, so they set their price slightly above the second most expensive, and the other supplier went just below the market leader. So they didn't want to be the most expensive in the market, so they set a price just below the most expensive one. And for example, if you have someone who always tries to be 10% above the second most expensive, and you have the other guy try to be 5% below the most expensive, you see where this is going. And if, as in this case, you have a book that people don't look at that often because the book isn't sold that frequently, and that algorithm does its thing for a while, you come up with a situation where pricing can get way out of hand. So once people notice what the pricing were in this case, and it actually made headline news, you saw that one of the competitors offered the book for roughly $24 million, which is probably not the intended price. But this is, I think, an important lesson for what can go wrong, horribly wrong in pricing if you blindly trust an algorithm and let it do its thing without looking at it in very much detail. So first lesson, pure competitor pricing can get way out of hand if you let it run. The second case, also maybe something some of you have known before. Dynamic pricing is always, of course, a thing in the pricing world, and Coca-Cola tried to do dynamic pricing based on the outside temperature. So they had a vending machine and it changed the price based on the outside temperature. And the idea is, I think, also very straightforward. If it's warm outside, demand goes up, particularly for cool drinks, and then the price also went up. But that didn't go very well with customers, as you might expect. People, not in every context do people appreciate dynamic pricing. I think in aviation, people are used to having very different price points at different times, but often, and in this case, it went public very quickly, people can perceive price differentiation, particularly based on properties that they don't accept or where they don't see that it causes different costs, or doesn't have a cost side effect. Then they perceive price differentiation as unfair, and this can go very wrong in terms of how this is perceived by customers. So, and I think from our point of view, this is a second important lesson. If you have a pricing that can become difficult from a customer point of view, in the sense that they feel cheated or being treated unfairly by some pricing rule, that can be very difficult to compensate, and you need to have tools and methods in place to make sure that these things don't happen. Let's look at the third example, and I would say that's almost my favorite example of pricing going wrong that I've read about many times over the past years, and that was American Airlines. When they were in need for quick cash, some of their employees had the idea to offer a free lifetime pass for first class customers, and they made a rough estimation how much their most frequent customers travel, and they offered the ticket free lifetime first class unlimited flight plan for $250,000 back in the 80s. What can go wrong? Actually, a lot can go wrong, and that is you have. And these are typically your best customers. So those are the ones you want to keep happy, not exploiting the system, but overusing the system. Particularly one of their customers made over 10,000 flights over 25 years, causing the airline a loss of roughly 20 million. And I read the story of one of the persons who bought the ticket. He was an entrepreneur. So, and his thinking was, so if I lose, now I have enough cash. If I lose the company, and I have this ticket, which is on my name, so it can't be taken away from me. I always have a bed to sleep. So he also, his thinking was, if I lose everything, I can always sleep in first class. and go somewhere. And that's definitely not the intention of such a flight plan. Another person was retired, and he flew musicians to concerts from Australia to South Africa and so on. And that's all he did after his retirement. And this is certainly not too much in the interest of the airline. So I think that's the third important lesson is don't underestimate the customer reaction given your pricing system. If you assume that customers will keep using your software, particular the most your best customers who use your service a lot, if you assume that they will just keep on using it, even in a case where they don't have marginal cost, things can go very, very wrong. So to summarize, and these are just three specific examples I think that we liked a lot. Of course, there are many more. I think also an important case in terms of when product development, product introduction can go very wrong is, you might look it up, is Ford's Edsel car in the 60s, where they built a car that did exceptionally well in terms of all the market research, and how it did in focus groups. All the analytics looked well, but when it was introduced finally, almost nobody bought it. So that was one of the greatest product fails in terms of introducing a new car to the market. So there are enormous there's an enormously large number of different horror stories, and we had to pick these. But if you want to group them, I think they all fall in three categories. That is either the competitor reaction. The horror stories are caused by getting the customer reaction wrong in terms of how customers use the solution, in terms of how customers, if also they might say that they want to buy a product beforehand, then they actually don't buy it once it's out. Another problem might arise from getting the competitor reaction wrong, which we highlighted in the book example. And the third one is, and that for that the Ford Edsel is an example. If you get the product very, very wrong, and that can go in all directions. There is the Edsel, which then actually nobody bought. There are other cars like I think the Q5 would be, the Audi Q5 would be an example of a car that where demand was massively underestimated, and they could have asked for a significantly higher price if they had done the proper research. I think I lost David. I hope that it's not me who lost the connection, and we still have people on the line. I'll just continue. So so that was the pledge. So we showed you something ordinary, a number of pricing horror stories, but the next step is the turn. So show you something different about that. And from our point of view, the true horror is not in these rare extreme cases, but the true horror is, I think, in the everyday things that can go wrong with pricing, that nobody hears about, but that also cause a lot of problems and challenges over time for pricing organizations. And also, as an example for such a case, here's an example that comes from our actual work, and it's from a consumer goods company that was looking at optimizing prices, and that was before we started working with them together. They used price elasticities, as many of us do in their daily work. And they got these price elasticities from one of the major data providers. And the number they got, it's a bit sanitized, but it's very close to the one we're showing here, minus 0.87 was the price elasticity that was computed by the data provider, and that then was used for this specific pricing study. And I think it's always be careful if someone provides a price elasticity of that is 2 digits, because that might be overly specific. Price elasticities are very difficult to measure to 2 decimals. So if someone offers that, that's always has to be taken with a grain of salt, I think. So, and what happened is they applied this price elasticity, and in the real world, they expected. So here you see on the left side, the light blue line, you have the actual sales. Sales are going down. The actual price goes up. Sales go down is to expected, but the problem was, if you look at the right side, they worked with a linear price elasticity, the minus 0.87, when in reality, price elasticity is not constant depending on the price change. But of course, depending on the demand function, price elasticity varies across the demand curve. And if you compute or apply a constant price elasticity, you can be very wrong. And in this case, the result was very wrong. So they expected demand development, the dark blue, the actual was the red dot underneath, and the performance was significantly below what was expected. And for example, with the solution that we now installed with them, that error wouldn't have been made, because it properly assesses price elasticities as they really apply in the world. All right, and I think just to wrap that up, and also to stay within the Halloween context, a lot of that comes from the use of price elasticities that are made with simple regression models. So you have these price sales combinations, maybe cleaned for some effects, seasonality, availability, all sorts of things. But in the end, you just draw a line through all this data, and you have an R-square of 0.05 or so. And then you work with this elasticity, and not too much good can come out of it. And I think we're now in a phase where modeling of demand reactions is way more advanced than can be captured in a single price elasticity number. And this is what we spend most of our day on. And this leads us to the third act in our magic trick, the prestige, where we want to show you the future of pricing. And we do that in the context of one of the examples we had before. Let me just switch my screen. David, you were gone.
Yeah, webinar of nightmares. So yeah, my internet completely just cut out. I'm back now. Hopefully it will hold out for the next 10 minutes or so.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
I thought I was gone, so I just kept talking, but got no response. All right. So so if you remember the book example, the biology making of a fly before, so we put this in our solution. And just to give you a bit of context, so we have, for this book, I think it's very trivial, value drivers. We have the book, the biology book. We have, in our case, 2 different forms of shipping, free shipping and $3.90. And we have 2 stores that sell the book. There are some differences in how the stores are evaluated. So people might buy from one rather than from the others. And the 2 stores are called Our Store, that's us, and the other store. And those are the 2 offering the product. Already prepared a little bit. So we have these, in this book market, we have the 2 vendors, both sell the biology book. We sell with free shipping, which might allow us to ask for a higher price. The other vendor has a shipping of $3.90. It's the other store. This is Our Store. We have the same costs in this for the book and for the shipping and handling. And the current price is $99.90. And we are looking at different price points that might be relevant for this product. So the question is, and it's essentially the same question that we had previously in the example. So we have 2 books. We're both selling at $99.90. We sell a bit more because we have free shipping, but the other store also sells a few books, because some customers might like the other vendor. And when we then look at the demand of both books, we have our demand functions here. And of course, when we see, let's say we lower our price, then the other party won't sell anything anymore. And so this allows us to manage the interdependencies here. And when we look at profit, in this case, from our point of view, so we're a bit below the profit optimum. So if we decrease our price, we can increase our profit. The same is true for the other vendor. He's also too expensive right now. And what then might happen, and this is essentially like a wargaming exercise, you might think, okay, let's start with him. He might think he can optimize himself and decreases the price, let's say up to here. And that puts us in a position where our price is way too expensive. We would earn a profit of roughly 7,000. Our maximum profit could be 12,500. So we might also decide to reduce our price. And this game, of course, is always these game theory games. They can go on for quite some time. So if we one after the other change our prices until it doesn't make sense for either one to go any lower, and that point is essentially here. So what I'm trying to say is, with a solution like this here, you can exactly model demand and also have a rule where, as in the book example before, a mechanism like that doesn't go on forever, but stops at some point, and that point is the equilibrium, where it's a Nash equilibrium, where not, in this case, where no one can improve himself or herself by reducing or increasing the price any further. And that would put a natural stop to this case. And if we look at the different examples, so we have the example where we are looking at the competitive price equilibrium, the case we just looked at, where we have this profit of around 7,000. That's the case we just looked at. The other competitor has a little bit less of a profit in this case, because it's selling at a lower price. And this allows us to find the optimum in the case where we're both trying to underbid the other partner. We can also look at a case where we are, let's say, looking at the current prices, or looking at the prices where we have, let's call it a cooperative optimum, which is the price combination that would actually be best for both parties. So with a solution like this, and you can estimate the demand from different sources, you actually have a tool at hand which would not make this mistake where prices run away, but would actually help yourself or a market to actually find the optimum without running away. And you can avoid the running away with putting in some limit, but it's always better to stop it by having a rule that allows you to actually look or identify the optimum. So let's get back to the presentation. Can you see the PowerPoint again?
Yeah.
All right, just to wrap it up. First of all, thanks for your attention. I think the key takeaways is that mistakes can be very expensive, particularly in the case of these extreme examples that we looked at in the beginning. The core errors that can be made is that you do not anticipate customer reaction properly, as in the Coca-Cola case, where people considered the pricing as unfair, or in the American Airlines case, where people had a lifetime pass and massively increased their usage. it's also, can't go into too much detail now, important to get the customer relationship right. So in some contexts, airlines can, for example, have dynamic pricing, but football clubs it would be much more difficult for football clubs to use dynamic pricing, because the relationship between the club and the fan is a very different one, more emotional one, and fans might also be offended by something like dynamic pricing, where they have to massively overpay. These are some of the examples. I think we'll send you the slides afterwards, so you can have a look at the examples and also the takeaways. And I think we highlighted it with one example, the core challenges that we identified, we can address with our solution, getting the customer behavior right, anticipating the effects of a customer reaction, as in the example that we showed, and also understanding the impact of changes or improvements in product and how these affect what customers buy, and also your profitability, sales, and revenue. David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ingo. So if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We did have one that has come in. Ingo, we've talked a lot about dynamic pricing, and there seems to be a lot of instances where dynamic pricing has failed. Where do you think dynamic pricing does play a good role?
That's a very large question for the last 2 minutes. I think it's so my honest answer is that, and I see this in some area where it has been introduced and it's now going back, because some companies underestimated the implications of true dynamic pricing and what that means for the customer relationship. I think it works well in something like airlines. The way that they have positioned themselves is, if an airline asks for an outrageous price for some flight, you just fly with someone else. That might not work perfectly with like the senator or the status cards, where you're trying to build a relationship. But these things have been underestimated by some companies, and because the pure market relationship between customer and the company is very different from a more lacking the proper word, but more emotional relationship. So for a company like, I don't know, Harley Davidson, if you have a tattoo of them on your arm, and you feel that they're trying to rip you off, that doesn't work very well. So if you have that emotional bond with a customer, there's also some price you have to pay for that, in the sense that you can't do everything in pricing.
Sure. No, thanks, Ingo. One last question we've got here. What kind of data and how much data do we need to feed your solution?
So our solution is very open in the type of data that we can use. We usually the basis is usually actual sales data, transaction data, sellout data, depending on how your industry works. But we can also work with any number of survey data, panel data. So essentially everything that you typically have available for your pricing work right now, we can use to create and parameterize the virtual shoppers that we use. If you're interested in, we're happy to discuss afterwards. And you can also consult our website and YouTube channel and so on further details.
Great, thanks, Ingo. I'd like to just let people know about the next webinar we have in the series. So, so yeah, thanks everyone again for attending today. Really appreciate your your time this afternoon. So this was the most recent one was today, and then we're going on with the next episode of our series will be Innovation and Disruption in CPG, which will be on the 19th of November. If you do have any suggestions about things or topics you'd like us to discuss at further webinars, we're all ears, so let us know and get in touch with us on the email address there. And please do feel free to get in touch with Ingo and myself via LinkedIn or drop us an email. And we look forward to seeing you on one of our webinars in the future. And have a great Halloween weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Great Halloween weekend. Goodbye.